Today, we're jumping into one of the most famous, or maybe I should say infamous, crimes of the 20th century. Now, you might think, hey, this case is over 90 years old. What's the big deal? Well, its echoes are absolutely still with us, in our laws, in the media, and even in how we think about justice itself. So, let's get right into it. It really all boils down to this one simple idea. This wasn't just some crime. No. This was an event that grabbed a hold of the entire country, and at a time when America was already at its most vulnerable. It literally changed the nation forever. So, to really get why this was such a massive deal, you have to understand the world it happened in. See, this wasn't just any kidnapping. The victim was basically American royalty, and that connection instantly turned a family's private nightmare into a national obsession. I mean, think about it. It was a perfect storm of absolute horror. On March 1st, 1932, the 20-month-old son of Charles Lindbergh vanishes. We're talking about the most famous man in America, this incredible aviation hero. And what's left behind? Just a crude, misspelled ransom note. All of this is happening, remember, during the Great Depression. People were already on edge, full of anxiety. So when this hero's home was violated, it felt like an attack on America itself. For 2 months, the nation held its breath, hoping for the best. But then, the worst happened. The child's body was found. Just like that. This wasn't a kidnapping case anymore. It was a murder investigation. And all that national grief, it just curdled into pure outrage. Okay, so now they're hunting a murderer. And to do it, investigators turned to this new, almost futuristic field, forensic science. This case would become a landmark. Really a major test case for criminal investigation, for better and, as we'll see, for worse. Let's break down how they tackled it. The whole investigation really balanced on 3 main pillars. First up, the ransom notes. They brought in experts to analyze the unique handwriting, trying to build a profile of the kidnapper. Second, that homemade ladder left at the scene. They studied every inch of it. And third, they followed the money, right? They traced the marked gold certificates that were used in the ransom payment. I mean, for the 1930s, this was some seriously cutting-edge detective work. But, and this is a huge but, we have to remember what this quote from PBS's American Experience points out. These techniques, they were basically brand new, in their infancy. The standards for collecting evidence, for analysis, they were just so much weaker than what we expect today. And that one fact right there is exactly why people are still fiercely debating this case almost a century later. For more than 2 long years, the trail just went completely cold. It seemed like they'd never find him. But then, one of those forensic pillars we talked about, the ransom money, finally paid off. It led investigators straight to the front door of a German immigrant, a carpenter living in the Bronx. So you gotta wonder, right? After all that time, more than 2 years, how did they finally get their guy? What was the big break? It wasn't a witness coming forward. It wasn't a surprise confession. Nope, it was just cold, hard cash. $14,600. This number right here is what it all came down to. After all that searching, police find a huge chunk of the marked ransom money, nearly 15 grand, just hidden away in the garage of a carpenter named Bruno Richard Hauptmann. For the cops, this was it. This was the smoking gun they had been desperately looking for. So the prosecution puts together its case, and it's built on this powerful trio of evidence. Point 1, he had the money. You can't argue with that. Point 2, handwriting experts get on the stand and swear his writing is a match for the ransom notes. And then, point 3, the bombshell. A wood expert claims that a specific plank from the kidnap ladder, they called it rail 16, was a perfect match to a missing floorboard from Hauptmann's attic. They talked about wood grain, even old nail holes. For the jury, it must have seemed totally open and shut. But here's the thing. Hauptmann went to his grave insisting he was innocent. And in all the years since, the certainty of that guilty verdict, well, it's been picked apart, questioned, and seriously challenged, raising these really uncomfortable questions about whether justice was actually served. And this really brings us to the heart of the debate. These 2 conflicting stories that are still being told today. On one side, you have the official version. Hauptmann was convicted based on a mountain of solid evidence. But on the other side, you have all these lingering doubts. For instance, handwriting analysis back then? It was more of a subjective art, not a hard science. Critics have even suggested that some evidence might have been planted. And you can't ignore the fact that Hauptmann, a German immigrant, was an easy target in an era of growing anti-immigrant sentiment.
Add in the incredible media pressure to get a conviction, and you start to wonder if the whole process was tainted from the start.
So look, whether you believe Hauptmann was guilty or innocent, one thing is absolutely undeniable: the impact of this case. It sent shockwaves through America that would permanently change the country in some really fundamental ways. I mean, check out this timeline. It shows a direct line from the crime to a massive change in our laws. The kidnapping happens in March 1932. By June of that same year, just a few months later, Congress passes the Federal Kidnapping Act. Everyone called it the Lindbergh Law. For the very first time, this made kidnapping a federal crime if a victim was taken across state lines, which gave the FBI the power to jump in. And that law, it's still a cornerstone of federal law enforcement today.
So when you boil it all down, this case left behind this huge three-part legacy. For our laws, it fundamentally changed the role of the federal government in violent crime. For forensics, it became this crucial lesson on both the incredible promise of science in the courtroom, but also the serious danger of treating expert testimony as infallible. And maybe the most lasting impact? In the media. This case basically wrote the playbook for the modern media frenzy that erupts around a celebrity tragedy. It's a cycle we see over and over and over again. And that really leaves us with this final, difficult question to chew on. The Lindbergh case was so much more than a crime. It was a national obsession, a media circus, a political catalyst, a test for science. And it forces us to ask something that's just as relevant today as it was back then. When a crime becomes a spectacle, when the whole world is watching, where does the search for justice stop? And where does the performance begin?